listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Listen up, maggots, we don't have much time. The LZ's hot with NDAs, so I'm gonna drop you out here. You'll have to speculate your way through enemy territory and make it back before that clock hits 0. Mission named Heroquest. Now go, go, go! Welcome to the Adventuring Party. I'm Savage.
I'm Scarr. You may have seen me on the box of certain video games being very, very built up.
And I am Gavin. You may have seen me purchasing all of the boxes so that none of you may see that.
And sparing us all. But yes, what box of a very burly man with a double-bedded battle axe are we talking about today, Savage?
We are going to talk about, we're going to speculate really about something that's coming from our deep past, a formative game for many of you out there, and perhaps a footnote, a point of interest for others. We're going to crack in to the announcement, or the countdown to an announcement, of a new Heroquest property, but we don't know what it is yet.
But Savage, what is this hero quest? Surely most heroes go on a quest. That's the nature of heroes, to quest.
Excuse me while I just open this can of aged cider, because the young'uns have come and have come to judge us.
Oh, we've got like three witches around a pot of speculation that bubbles and boils. We've got a trio here. I will be playing the crone this evening, having been around for the first fresh gasps of Heroquest in its heyday. Scarr, you, I believe, are taking on the role of the mother. You've played Heroquest, haven't you?
Yes, I've played, and for most of the time that you were playing it, so we're in the wilds of Roscommon, I was in the crags of Donegal seeking a copy and never been able to find one. But I have played it since in my old age.
And Gavin, you will be the maiden this evening, because
It predates the board game renaissance. I'm not interested. You're going to have to force me into it.
Okay, well, we are 2 days, 1 hour, 34 minutes, and as of now, 35 seconds away from finding out what it is Avalon Hill and Hasbro are cooking up for us. There is a countdown timer.
This episode will be dated the moment it comes out.
Obsolete the very moment we stop recording, but I don't care. I'm too excited. I love Heroquest. I love everything about it that introduced me to so many aspects of the hobby, as we like to put it. It was, for those of you who are sadly uninformed, Heroquest was put out by Milton Bradley in partnership with GW, Games Workshop, way back in the day. It hit store shelves in toy stores all over the world, both this side of the Atlantic and in North America, to great interest and eventually acclaim, because there really at the time was absolutely nothing quite like it. Heroquest is played on a standard sort of fold-out board that has a dungeon marked out, or at least dungeon rooms, onto which you place traps and doorways, walls and bits of furniture to create a dungeon that can be rearranged depending on the scenarios in a little booklet. Through this labyrinth of peril and monsters, the players are guided by whoever takes on the role of the dungeon master. They run the monsters and traps and NPCs of the game, of which there are very few, against the adventurers who are using a rule-to-move system and some unique combat dice to fight their way through a dungeon, gather up treasure and equipment, steer clear of traps, defeat enemies, and eventually reach a quest prize or escape a dungeon by finding the escape tile or the stairs tile. It was hugely popular in its day. It had a number of expansions that expanded on the kinds of monsters you would fight, slightly expanded some of the rules, and gave you new adventures and tile sets to lay on your board. It is a forerunner for a huge number of very popular games in the same vein today. Descent and Advanced Heroquest. Gloomhaven would be probably one of the things that most directly borrows the idea, some of the flavor, but not a lot of the mechanical ideas, it has to be said. Yeah. So we're here just to speculate wildly. I've talked enough at this point. So let's, Scarr, do you have anything to add to that, or will we throw to Gavin to ask us what the hell we're going on about?
I think you've done a pretty good job of explaining the outset.
All right,
I could
Gavin
make random jokes about Glorantha modules, but that's a different discussion.
Well, we can talk about how it links into the wider world of gaming in a little bit, and I'd say we'll go to you for that one. But first of all, Gavin, it's 2 days, 1 hour, 31 minutes, and 20 seconds. Are you excited yet? Do you care?
There's board games released every new day. Every old company who was popular back in the 80s when all they had was a printer and it seemed a periodical. Every board game company had their own periodicals. Why now in the age of new mechanics and we're now at the forefront of new and interesting board game design, should we really care about such a tired old property? Like I'm looking at this screen, I can see the sort of the old school nature of this skeletal figure, these pauldrons. They aren't in the new modern age of game design. Why should we care about this possible reprint for an old game whose mechanics are dated possibly years before many people even started playing board games?
Scarr, help me here. The cynicism of youth is boiling away at my enthusiasm.
Well, that's 2020 for you.
How do we answer that?
You could say that Heroquest's mechanics are simplistic, random, and woefully inadequate, and you'd be mostly right, but that was sort of the appeal of them. People, even the very fact that Advanced Heroquest existed is sort of a clue into the niche that Heroquest really fills for so many gamers of the late 80s and early 90s. It was the gateway. It was how they discovered that you could play as a bunch of morally questionable thugs going into a dungeon to rough up people with different colored skin and take all their gold. It was very much what led a lot of people to discover not only D&D and D&D likes, but other Games Workshop products, and thus onto Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k. It was the inroad that made people think. Is it actually, am I reaching too much to say that may have been the critical role of it, that the terrible cheesy advertisements on BBC would have been the critical role of their day in terms of getting young nascent proto gamers into the hobby?
There's a ad from 91 that aired in the UK in which the immortal line, "I use my broadsword," is uttered. That does exactly what you say. It serves in a chunk of maybe 45 seconds. It serves the same purpose as all of Matt Mercer's strivings to completely misrepresent something in the most compelling and interesting way possible, so that you will rush out and buy a copy of it for yourself. It kind of makes what already looks like a great game really exciting to the young, impressionable mind. In 91, I was 11. Yes, I was about 11 years old. Perfect. I was just ripe for this to come along. Gavin asks why we should care. Well, first of all those things you love, everything, all of it, built on a foundation of games such as Heroquest, you ungrateful cur. It introduced people to, it is a gateway game. And as a gateway game, it is something you look back on very fondly, but would probably never touch the same way again. Might use it to get your kids hooked. But it's not for you. I don't think I'd be sitting down to a game of HeroQuest today and be feeling terribly engaged in the moment-to-moment play, except as an exercise in nostalgia, which is why this coming announcement, 2 days, 1 hour, 27 minutes and 16 seconds from now, is such a live wire for me. I tingle like I tingled when that electric fence turned off. See future or previous episode, folks. I'm not exactly sure where I am in the timeline. All I know is I'm 2 days, 1 hour, 27 minutes away from learning about a new HeroQuest, because a new HeroQuest brings the possibility that the thing I loved will be brought to me again in a new, better form. And I think we should now start to speculate wildly about what this might be. Gavin, you mentioned a whole bunch of games that have much more interesting mechanics. And as Scarr alluded to, roll to move is a device we can do away with in an instant. We do not need it. It is no good for us. It is, unless we're rolling to find out which way a randomly thrown object goes and how far. I think there's no use for roll to move. So that's something that should be discarded from original HeroQuest. But let's talk about what it could include. So, what might that be?
Well, one would assume that they're... Well, first off, we could be pretty certain that the release date is going to be on the 30th anniversary. So, I assume HeroQuest originally came out in 1991.
So next year?
Yeah. Well, that everything's happening next year after the bad stuff's over, because the bad stuff's going to end, right? But yeah, we could presume we're a pretty good read on the release date. The question is the format. Like, so the names attached to this are, I've heard a couple actually. You said Avalon Hill and Hasbro?
Yes, yeah, indeed.
That's interesting. Does Hasbro own Milton Bradley now? Because I know they're basically the Disney of the toy and entertainment world right now.
Pretty sure they own Avalon Hill as well.
Well, yeah, they definitely own Avalon Hill, so that's...
Oh, they almost certainly own Milton Bradley then. No sign of GW's insignia on any of this, so I have to suspect that it will not be tying itself to the old world or to anyone else. 2
decades of blood on in the courtroom to get the IP away from GW's hands.
But I don't understand. GW, they only make Warhammer titles, correct?
Oh,
it's throwing us. This is low quality bait being thrown into the arena. But I'm a hungry dog. I'll bite. GW have certainly at that point in time were partnering with people to make these kind of breakout or sort of side projects. Space Crusade is obviously the most obvious stablemate to HeroQuest, as it was, I think as someone pointed out earlier, the way to introduce people to the sci-fi end of their output. Yeah. I honestly struggle to remember all of the other bits and pieces they put out in terms of board games back in the day.
Pretty sure there was both Advanced HeroQuest and Advanced Space Crusade.
But the thing is, they were entirely GW projects that allowed them to try and siphon off the following that HeroQuest built, to sort of further feed them into the GW ecosystem, rather than have them sort of play this and maybe buy expansions for this and not turn to anything else.
It's interesting. Like, we could have almost an entire episode on the timeline of this, how this was this moment when the switch over between 80s and 90s was both GW's most creative period in both transformative, but it's also what set them down the road to the wargaming juggernaut they became thing, because this is when they finally perfected 40k second ed, and I'm pretty sure they got their the Warhammer war game into its most. I'm sure there's a debate there, but yeah, this is when they were. So it's the same period that they were making all of these really wild IPs and successful collaborations with other companies, that they were also seeding the pieces for their transformation to the juggernaut of wargame that they became.
You touched.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Touched, just to bring us away from the merciless takedown of GW and their practices. You touched briefly on sort of what you wish to do away with in a new Heroquest. If this isn't just a straight reprint they're bringing out, this is sort of a revamping of this for a newer audience or for an older aging audience, what would you like to see new introduced to Heroquest? What do you think it was lacking, and what do you think will bring it into this new age of board game?
So at the start of that, I fall between two stools. I suppose I can occupy a couple of positions on that. I would settle, I think, for a reprint. I wouldn't be wildly happy about it, but I piecemealed out my copy of Heroquest decades ago. Some of it got chopped up to make Blood Bowl cheerleaders, don't ask. Some of it got sort of subsumed into other projects. I still have little bits and pieces of Heroquest knocking around my gaming collection today, but I think some of it went into a game society's library, never to be seen again. But that's by the by. So if it was just a chance to replace a beloved childhood toy, I'd bite. I have to admit I would. If they did nothing but reprint it. However, it would be the least imaginative and least beneficial way of tackling Heroquest in 2021. What I would really like to see is that all of those games that came after Heroquest offered advancements in how to play a dungeon delving board game. Much more modular sort of designs came about through things like the Castle Ravenloft board game and other preceding games. I'm spotty on the exact time that any particular mechanic was introduced. I think custom combat dice are perfectly fine. I think a movement stat rather than roll to move is a bit of a given. A bit more diversity in characters and character types, and sort of you could, I think, probably revamping the magic system. The magic system was a bit one and done, and there was some advantages and disadvantages that were quite swingy. In terms, it was a card-based system. You played a magic spell, and that was it. You got that one go. If we were to take from things like Descent and obviously more recently Gloomhaven, action cards, or maybe a pool of actions that can be refreshed or traded in or spent in different ways to get those clutch moments in a dungeon would be good. There's so much of Heroquest mechanically that I'd simply do away with. But what I really want is something that feels very Heroquesty, because the crucial thing about Heroquest in my mind is that it is not for a 30-something or a 40-something at this point gamer. It should actually be something I can hand my 6-year-old son in a couple of years and go, here's something you'll understand, but more crucially, here's something you'll enjoy. Hopefully this births a lifelong love of a hobby that I've had the opportunity to enjoy forever, and hopefully you will too. It has to be, in my mind, a much more modern game mechanically. I think there's no harm in cleaving to the old school cool that made Heroquest so timeless. But crucially, it should be a way to show people into a hobby, not some desperately advanced sort of Mage Quest style thing that has people poring over rule books and debating optimization on threads and diving into the minute and spending an hour to set up and an hour to do post-game sort of bookkeeping. It has to be as immediate as getting the board on the table, rolling a few dice, picking a quest, turning some cards over, and flinging some monsters about. It should be that. Ideally, it'll be that. Okay, I've spoken.
I think, well, first off, it shouldn't have a large rules footprint. I do think the rules should be designed and worked on and iterated, but that should be completely invisible to the person who sits down to play it. The designer should definitely go over the rules, figure out what appeals and what doesn't. And I suspect that roll to move is going to survive in some form, simply because that sort of random play does appeal to younger players. Whether they'll replace it with some kind of, instead of rolling d6, it's some kind of d3 to add on to a movement stat, maybe. But I suspect that a dice will be involved somewhere. I think, honestly, the strength of the a new iteration of Heroquest is probably going to be in the scenario book. I think what you're going to need to have is you're going to need to have a bunch of one-player scenarios plus the original classics. You're going to have to have...
That's a good idea, yeah.
You're going to have one-shots, and you're going to have the campaign that there was. Was it a two-parter or a three-parter? I've forgotten what came in the box itself. I know I played through, I think, a two-part...
the campaign sort of strung itself together very loosely over, I think, about 12 maps.
Yeah, I feel like you need to have one of those, but also a bunch of one-off scenarios and scenarios that will work if there's just like, literally it's just you running for your child.
Yeah, and that would be a good mode to have. A two-player Heroquest is perfectly possible. It lives as a party of 3 or 4, but it was a good enough game to run with a few modifications, a few bumps and handicaps back in the day. But yeah, certainly something that could be run. And solo adventures, if you could have a basic AI along the lines of things like Blackstone Keep, that would allow you to sit down with your copy that you've received, cracked open, and just you've no one else to play with because this is the world we live in now. For some
reason, yes, you cannot reach other people to play games with you.
Gavin, anything from the sort of the big library of games that arguably have done this better since that you think definitely needs to show up?
I think to sort of to appeal to sort of a modern audience, you need to. This is purely bias and conjecture, but from hints of what you're saying, you need to have a good quality of writing. I feel it doesn't have to be extensive. You don't need to have reams and reams of backstory. All you need is for it to be engaging enough as sort of a board gamer, to have that theme strong enough. When you say about sort of the enjoyment of going in and of the wildness and the nature of this of your experience there. If there is sort of a good bed of good writing, it can help with those crazy stories, those crazy situations. One thing that would be interesting to see is looking at sort of more modern stuff, Gloomhaven, of course, but also things like Imperial Assault, is the campaign as a branching thing. A thing where there is consequence, there is you feel like you're affecting the game. It would be very interesting to see that sort of if you don't do as well in a particular mission, something else happened. It doesn't need to be better, it doesn't need to be worse, but something else.
So if you fireball the scroll of infinity instead of taking it back to the wizard, you get an entirely different storyline.
When it doesn't have to be an entirely different storyline, just something different to be engaging. That sort of would interest me personally. I think would sort of just push it over the edge, and especially in sort of this modern environment, would help. I think it's going to sell well. I think people are going to buy it. I think even if it is just a straight reprint, there is enough love for this game that I feel burning within even just my fellow co-hosts here. I'm not in the room with them, but I can feel it from a distance away. But I think to be truly stand out on its own, I think those are sort of some of the two important things.
I'm an inferno of ludological desire. As we are only 2 days, 1 hour, 12 minutes and 50 seconds away from discovering if all of my dreams are going to come through. Shall we engage in some very wild speculation now?
Well, I think you had one that you brought up earlier.
Oh, yeah?
Something about electronic aids?
Oh, you're feeding me a line. Good on you. Okay, I've got and another one occurred to me just now. But yes, we are entering the second decade of the 21st century, and that demands that everything requires batteries and internet connection. So I think they would miss a trick now if the people who are making Heroquest renewed, reborn, didn't reimagine it with some sort of app or tablet-based component. Now, these are not entirely unknown to board gamers, but Heroquest particularly might benefit from a little app that allows you to have the map in front of you if you're the dungeon master, and you can perhaps use it to generate new dungeons randomly or with an icon set that you can drag and drop, much like the fabled blank map page at the back of the original book, which I'm sure many of us photocopied or maybe filled in and had to use their erasers on before they realized just what a colossal mistake they'd made. That seems to me like that's ground level stuff. They should have that as a sort of an additional, a free app to download. You could expand on that, though, with a little soundboard that might allow you to have some barks and shouts from the orcs and goblins and minotaurs that pour out of the dungeon at your players, just to bring a little immersion to the table, a bit of fun to help sell it to younger players. They can capture their imagination. Lastly, it occurs to me that much like Mario Maker on is it the Switch, one of these consoles, the idea that you could share your creations online strikes me as an important calling card in the 21st century. That you could craft a dungeon of such beautiful and deadly simplicity that it would earn Dungeon Master points on the Heroquest marketplace. People would download it and rate it and love it and modify it and take inspiration from it. And you would
suspect there would be an awful lot of dungeons based around one long, thin set of rooms with two large rooms at the other end.
And they would be cast aside. There'd be oddities that always pop up when you invite the community to create. But there's a budding level designer out there. There's a budding experienced designer or a quest writer out there who might latch onto this as their first brush with manipulating people's expectations and directing their attention. That could be of great benefit down the line. Somebody somewhere, I hope, 20, 30 years' time, we'll be talking about this version of Heroquest as fondly as I regard and recall my own from all those years ago. So those are the two things I think should happen. I think there should be an app-based component, although I would stop short at using it for sort of random or pseudo-random generation, although maybe quest generation is a possibility. But I wouldn't use it to determine monsters hit. I think rolling the custom dice is kind of a beautiful thing. And I don't think I'd relegate that to virtual polyhedrons tumbling across the digital bays. And secondly, a sharing feature that I can, once I've created my dungeon, I can upload it and let other people enjoy it and see what they make of it for themselves. That's where I'd hope they innovate in the digital space.
I'm still something that Gavin said earlier about writing made me think. Like, as we said, it looks like this new version doesn't have anything to do with GW as far as we can see. I'm curious to see how it's going to be written in order to distance itself, because the original Heroquest didn't really wallow in the Warhammer universe in any real way. That didn't really happen until Warhammer Quest came along in, I think, 1995. But so I'd be really curious to know, are they going to be putting more of their own stamp on it? And how much of the old stuff that never made it, that was a staple of Heroquest but never really made it into the Warhammer zeitgeist will emerge. Like, they had those weird one-eyed lizard men who I think had...
The Fimir.
The Fimir, yes.
If I recall correctly, they're actually tied up with GW as a property. They don't use them anymore, but They're probably not going to be available to Avalon Hill to use. I could be entirely ass backwards on that. I've dropped a link into the chat to a little article that goes over some of the legal back and forth. So we might include that in the show notes for this. But yeah, I think this is an opportunity for them to broaden their horizons in terms of the feature set or factions or any number of other things. Fingers crossed on that front. I don't just want a slavish adherence to Heroquest Evolved. I guess I want to feel the same way about it, but I don't need to have exactly the same things to feel that way.
Yeah, I would very much like to see if they're going to come up with their own set of one-eyed lizard men and give them something interesting to do. But yes, I'd be curious to see there's the element of, they're probably going to make it more punchy, more direct. I'm curious though if they're going to be putting their own, for whatever product identity on it. Like they're going to add in just enough writing to make it more Avalon Hill / Hasbro than its Milton Bradley roots. I'd be curious to see if they're going to make any big inroads there, or they're just focused on the product.
Okay, Gavin, I hope I've convinced you now that your formative years are a bleached and desolate wasteland, having not had the shining sun of Heroquest to nurture you along your way. But of course, in 2 days, 1 hour, 6 minutes from now, you will bask like the rest of us in the glow of a Heroquest renewed, for which I think we can all be eternally grateful. Does that sound like a possibility?
You have your nuclear glow has warmed the cockles of this young dead heart.
Excellent. Who knows? We might close out this year with a lot more to look forward to than we ever expected. But for now, this has been a mass of speculation. I freely admit. I am at this point full of hope, having climbed aboard the hype train and yelled "choo choo" while hanging my head out the window. And of course, I know I will pay for that in time. But for the next 2 days, 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 6 seconds, I'm going to hope eternal. But until then, this party's over. Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.